Good morning, everyone. Hey, guys. I was just kind of contemplating some truths, and I've heard it said that the first generation builds the wealth, the second generation spends the wealth, and the third generation has to start all over again. But I noticed among the poor, it's the first generation survives it, the second generation is on their own, and the third generation may get lucky because among the poor, there's this idea that the only way to become wealthy is to get lucky. And let's discover that word luck for just a second, because I live in Las Vegas, and I'm gonna be honest, I've walked in casinos multiple times, and I can count maybe in the last 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 times that I've actually heard those registers ringing, those slot machines ringing, and someone actually winning money while I was actually there. And normally I'm just there to eat dinner, go bowling, watch a movie. Son wants to play video games, something like that. Hanging out with relatives, brought them in town, just a nice meetup spot. So let's discover that. The first generation, they earn the money. The second generation, they spend the money. The third generation, they have to start all over again. So I want to change that narrative, okay? But coming from where I came from a poor narrative. There was no one leaving me anything. And we talk about this often, but I want this to become crystal clear to you. When my father passed away, unfortunately, even though he was an insurance man, because of his cancer and because of the fact that he was one of 19 brothers and sisters, my father died with nothing, left nothing. And the reason I say that is, even between his chemotherapy and wanting to help his family as much as he humanly could, there was roughly about $40,000 left when he passed away. And to me, that's nothing compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I saw personally with my own eyes riding with my parents when they retired. And this was only like 5-6 years later, something like that. Now mama has dementia. She has needs. The average cost of even a nice home was about $50,000 to $60,000. A facility that could take care of her, it was probably going to be a little bit more than that because she did have dementia, and some of the in-room care that we would have to have, and medicines and everything else. And to me, this is the part that no one figures into their math. You're barely making it. You can't even afford to die. I hate to say it, it's the truth. Average person can't even afford to die. And normally when they die, they leave heartache to their family. The family ends up losing the house, losing the cars, having to move, make some changes in their lives. And although this isn't the end of the world, aren't they already dealing with the mourning of the loss of you? And so if there's a way that you could do something and make some changes where the next generation doesn't have to experience what you're experiencing, why wouldn't you make every attempt to do that now? Because this, my friends, is the basis of what changed my life. Because I got into the life insurance game about 4 years after I went homeless. And when I got into the game, about maybe 5 years. But when I got into it, I went into it because I realized I'd already gone homeless. So really, quite frankly, if I died, my kids were going to be left with nothing. And that wasn't fair. That wasn't cool. That wasn't good, right? And so I wanted to be able to at least bury myself. I think I started with maybe a $65,000 or $100,000 policy. And the idea was to be able to pay 90 days worth of bills, not have the heartache on them, and to pay off, obviously my funeral and things like that, those expenses. And I know the average person doesn't even like talking about that, because we're going to live forever. That's kind of the mindset of the average worker, right? But the reality is we all see it happen, right? And I just wanted that peace of mind of knowing that my kids had some form of protection. But then there's another layer to that. The other layer is that they know where the policies are located, that they know who the points of contact are, that you have a will or living trust already built up for your children. It's great to earn. The first generation earns the money. Second generation spends the money. And the third generation has to start all over again, right? And so on top of that, my wife and I, we had to teach our kids about money. Like, we wanted them to understand resources. So we had them read Farrah Gray's book. Farrah Gray's book was called Millionaire. And Farrah Gray was already a millionaire by the time he was 16 years old. Living in the housing projects in Chicago, he would go around in a suit. His mom would go around with him, and he would actually sell T-shirts. That was his first business, and he did quite well with that business, right? And he made himself into an institution, and I think this is where most of us mess up. You have to set up your mind, make your mind right first. It's not a product. There's tons of great products, right? And, there's tons of great stores, but then again, there's also tons of great stores that close, if we think about it, right? Ones that we used to go to all the time, right? They're closed over the years. I've forgotten so many of them. There's been so many, right? So it's not about the product. Product is just one portion of it. Just Starbucks has it right, more so than anyone. And I said this yesterday. Disney does the be our guest, right? Be our guest. That's really just a sales pitch. But here's how Starbucks has it right. So Starbucks decided that they weren't just in the coffee business. They were in the sensory business. When you go inside of a Starbucks, they make sure the beans, I'm sure they put some of those beans out just so you can smell them. Might spray some of that aroma around. Seriously, that's part of it. Because it gives you that feeling of being awake and being alive. And this is where most people mess up, because if you think from Starbucks to Disney, there's a theme going here. The same people that go to Starbucks are the same people that can afford to go to Disney. And if you look, you add to that a bookstore, some of the biggest bookstores that are out there, the Barnes and Nobles and those guys, there's a linear theme here too. The same people that read the books are the same people that drink the Starbucks, and the same people that go to Disney. And this is where we mess up, because we put garbage in our bodies. We're not in the right circle of friends. We're hanging out. I mean, I'm just going to tell it like it is. When I was in the hood, from the liquor store to the Rib Shack, or the, whoever is selling the soul food in the area probably doesn't have their situation together. So basically, if you hang out with 7 broke friends, you're going to be the 8th. And that's just the whole concept. That's the difference between making it and not making it. So when I was broke and poor, I used to hang out at the bookstore. Probably couldn't even afford the book. I'm not going to lie. Couldn't even afford the book. But I'm sitting in Barnes & Noble trying to see if there's something that I can find of value. Sometimes I'm on the clearance rack. And to be honest with you, that wasn't that long ago, guys. We're talking 15, 16 years ago, 17 years ago, when this was a thing for me. And I really learned a lot about myself, that I could be content inside my mind. And I didn't have to have a ton of money in my pocket in order to be happy. I could read a book and I could find satisfaction. And it was in those days that I found The Richest Man Who Ever Lived book, which is Stephen K. Scott's book from New Me. And so that's why I look at it as a miracle that, hey, man, I know this guy now. He's riding in my Porsche. This is amazing, right? I'm taking him to the airport. Look at this. We're having a conversation about my past, right? And that's the part that I really need to understand if you really want to go there, right? If you really want to be transported there, what are you doing to make yourself different? Because I can tell you, the old habits that are in your DNA are not marked towards success. They're the habits that brought you to where you are. Those are the habits that brought you despair, that brought poverty and lack upon your life. So why wouldn't you do everything in your power to convert from being that person into being the whole person that you want to be? Basically, just take your imagination and the parts of the imagination that show you all these grand things, these grandiose things, and these grandiose things about you, Start becoming that person bit by bit. You know, my off days, even though my bills weren't paid back then, got better and better. And they got better and better because Brian was spending about 4 or 5 hours at the bookstore just reading with my mouth shut and enjoying what was getting fed to my brain. And that's the truth. So when it really comes down to it, my friends, the poor, unfortunately, they scratch and survive. They survive it. The second generation, that's the first generation. The second generation, they're on their own. And that third generation might just get lucky. The wealthy, first generation, they earn the money. Second generation, they spend the money. And the third generation has to start all over again. So regardless, when you get to the third generation, it's about the same. So my goal is to solve a problem. Diamond VIP is here so that your first generation earns the money, your second generation earns more money, and the third, and they learn more, and the third generation innovates. That's why Diamond VIP is here. The first generation earns the money, the second generation earns more money, and they innovate in the third generation. That should be your goal. That should be everybody's goal. God bless.